The Prime Minister is under renewed pressure after Lee Anderson defected to Reform UK. The Ashfield MP, who'd been suspended for Islamophobic remarks, becomes the new party's first sitting MP.
As I said just now, it's his third party in 6 years, so 30p lead to three-party lead. He was suspended as a Labour councillor in 2018. And speaking yesterday, he explained, slightly nervously, his decision. Have a listen, have a watch.
Like millions of people in this country, I feel that we are slowly giving our country away. We are allowing people into our country that will never integrate and adopt our British values. Parliament doesn't seem to understand what many British people want. It is no secret that I've been talking to my friends in Reform for a while, and Reform UK has offered me the chance to speak out in Parliament on behalf of millions of people up and down the country who feel that they're not being listened to. And like millions of people up and down the country, all I want is my country back.
Well, TalkTV's chief political commentator, Peter Cardwell, is back with us, and we're also joined by opinion and features editor at City A.M, Alys Demby. Peter, Reform have got their first MP.
They certainly have. It's a massive boost for them. It's really interesting as well, the dynamics within that party, because Nigel Farage is their sort of president, but Richard Tice is the leader of that party. Is Lee Anderson going to take instructions from either of those men? I'm not so sure. He's very much his own man. But yes, he is today a Reform MP, and that is a massive boost for them. It's not a massive shock. We'd heard, indeed, a couple of weeks ago that Richard Tice and Lee Anderson were having a chat about this, and then this press conference yesterday confirms that news.
Now, Alice, for me, we were saying this last day, I'm delighted to have you on. You can snipe from the sidelines that he's had three parties in 6 years. You can talk about an ideological journey. My issue is that in January he said he wouldn't jump ship. He has. Fine, that happens. He also voted to say that if a person mid-Parliament jumps ship, we should call a by-election, yet he's refusing to and saying it could be a May election. I get really angry that we have a Prime Minister, I don't care what Peter says to me, we have a Prime Minister who was not elected to be Prime Minister by the British people in 10 Downing Street. We now have politicians who think for 6 months they can take our taxpayers' money. They've been voted in representing one thing they don't agree with anymore. He should be out, there should be a by-election, surely.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a sort of constitutional principle that you have to face a by-election, but if you recall when two MPs defected to UKIP back in, when was it, 2010-ish, that parliament, they did face by-elections and then won, and that really added to their credibility. And I think the important thing to remember about Lee Anderson is that he hasn't quite defected. He got kicked out of the Tory party for his comments about Sadiq Khan. He was never a Conservative, really, to begin with. As you say, he was a Labour councillor, then a Conservative.
And moves when he gets sacked or gets suspended, as we said earlier as well.
But he would say, of course, that this, he hasn't changed. His values and his views are very much the same. His view as the Conservative Party has changed, and actually his own political views, which his constituents know well, because he's one of the most high-profile MPs in this country, haven't changed. Therefore, OK, he might have a different label, but actually he's believing and saying and doing the same things.
But a lot of his speech yesterday was anti-immigration.
Yep.
I would argue, as I'm sure many people would, that this version of the Tory party that we have now is the most hostile we have ever been to migrants, Alice. Yeah,
I mean, if the current Conservative Party isn't hostile enough to migration for Lee Anderson, well, then I think, yeah, that's an interesting position that he's in. I suppose from Reform's perspective, they've made a big deal out of Lee Anderson joining, but he's not Nigel Farage. This is the issue. For Reform, what they know, what they really need to make a huge impact to the next elections, for Nigel Farage to come back. Lee Anderson...
Does Lee Anderson win as a Reform candidate? By-election or general election, yes or no? You're the political experts.
I don't think so. I think Labour win in that constituency. It's a really interesting constituency. He's got a majority of about 5,000. There's a very interesting political grouping called the Ashfield Independents as well. They have 30 out of 35 seats on the local council, and they came second in the general election in 2019. So it's a very weird constituency.
And I think the thing to remember is that actually Reform aren't really interested in government. They are interested in smashing the existing Conservative Party.
This is
they know that what they will do is split the right in the election.
Well, the statement from Ashfield and Mansfield Conservatives says locally we regret that Lee Anderson had made the decision. It is clear that voting for Reform cannot deliver anything apart from the Keir Starmer-led Labour government that would take us back to square one. Labour Reform and the Independents have no plan for Ashfield. Only the Tories are getting things done for Ashfield and delivering on priorities. So it sounds already as if his local association is saying, hold on a minute.
Well, interesting, and also if you look at some of the comments that Lee Anderson has made within the last 6 months or so, he called Richard Tice, the leader of his new party, a pound shop Nigel Farage. So if you add the pound together with the 30p Lee, you get £1.30. But the
See, a new career in stand-up doesn't beckon. It doesn't. It just doesn't.
Actually stole that from a tweet. Anyway, but the point is as well that he's also said about reform. He said reform isn't the answer. Reform only leads to Keir Starmer being Prime Minister. Exactly the sentiments that his former association in Ashfield are now expressing that you've just read out.
Alys, I'd love your take on one thing. We touched upon it, and then we're going to move on. In the last hour, he said, I want my country back. People will jump up and down. He made Islamic comments about Sadiq Khan. Thank you. He'll say, critics will say, that's what he's talking about. Others will say, no, hold on, he's talking about a fact that our country has no police on the streets. We have people coming in who should be sent back to their country because they're not refugees. Yes, we look after real refugees, but this country is a joke. We've got high crime. You can't see a dentist. You can't see a doctor. There's marches every single day. There's almost civil unrest. Is that what he's talking about, or is he being racist? That's what I want to know.
I think your viewers, you know, if you listen to their comments, what they feel is exactly what you're expressing, this kind of plague on both your houses. And Lee Anderson has been on the same journey, as he calls it, as many voters, having, you know, in seats like his, having gone from Labour to the Conservatives and now feeling, well, in a sense, sod you all. And I think a lot of voters feel the same way.
I think there's an apathy out there.